Hey, welcome back to Unschooled Theology. I realize I forgot to introduce us last time. I am one of your hosts, Derek. With me, I have Evan, and
Hey,
hello.
hey, good sir.
Okay, today we are going to do Genesis 1 3, and there is a lot packed into this little verse, and we're going to try and get it all in one episode. And it seems like, how can there be that much? Because reading the verse, it is, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So rather small, but there's a lot packed in here. So uh,
So buckle up.
yeah, first I want to let me get out of the way some of the more materialistic concerns here, right? Obviously, there is a curiosity of the idea of light without the sun, without a seeming source of light. Uh, I just want to say that's not beyond God's power, obviously, because He's God. But there are reasons to consider the possibility of a scientific explanation, which is this idea that the Earth existed early on, surrounded by a cloud of dust that was so intense that it wouldn't let through any light, and along came a meteor that struck the Earth, tilted it on its axis, which would be the beginning of the foundation of life, and pulled away enough of that dust
That
that,
light would be seen.
yeah, yeah, that while the
Mm.
sun couldn't be recognized, light would be able to shine through. So, just that. Also, we mentioned this before. I figure let's throw it out there again. This with the previous verse combined, we see the ancient four elements. So you have earth, which was formless and void, water, which God was hovering over. Hovering is the idea of wind, air, and here light, which is associated with fire, obviously. So you have the four ancient elements in there. Again, material description is not particular important or relevant to me, but just it should be noted that this is a verse that potentially aligns with materialistic explanations as well.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and this may exceed our capacity in terms of theoretical physics, but like even if you're wanting to reconcile with their concept of the creation of the universe, of light coming to being, those I'm not sure, but I think those may be separate moments, because then that would be stars coming into being and something
mhm.
that is actually.
Recently, there has been discovered the idea of light separate from fire,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that makes sense. So,
yeah,
but that's a very recent discovery. But yeah,
yeah,
that's, you know,
yeah. Because the prior the initial physical description that we're positing there is very Earth centric.
yes,
Light exists outside of Earth; it's just surrounded by it so that it can't see it. And God's initiation of "Let there be light" is the moment where light is revealed. But
right,
the existence of light is something different
right,
than that, potentially.
right.
But again, the physical descriptions are not as crucial in the
I don't,
reading of this,
it's like the
depending on
it
who you
may
are.
be, yeah, it may be gathered into there, but I don't think you I don't think you come to the Bible looking for the materialistic explanation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's
so,
reasonable.
to that end, let's consider for a moment here the more symbolic meaning. And we talked previously in the previous verse how we had a situation of God being uh, not interacting with the earth yet, and earth being very disordered as a result. So, in that sense, light here signifies and signals God's engagement with the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the beginning of the universe, this is God creates things. Now, here is the process of bringing order to the universe,
Mm-hmm.
bringing that heavenly spiritual aspect and mixing it with the matter, offering that as an alternative to the darkness that exists on the material. So this is this is that cycle coming to begin, and in ancient cosmology, light is a symbol of order. Again, we talked about this last
Which
episode.
makes sense.
Walk around in the dark, see how orderly a process that is, and then turn on a light, and you'll find it's much more orderly. So
Yeah, yeah.
um,
There's the thing that hits me, and I mentioned this in the last episode too, is just the drama about this.
mm,
That emerge from a dark room into something that's lit, or turn on a flashlight at night, something, that light emerging from darkness is such a dramatic thing. It's one of the most dramatic possible shifts
mhm.
of state you could have in
Yes.
in the physical world, is going from darkness to light appearing. It's so full and dramatic, and you even see that, and you may have a further interpretation of this, which is fine. Like we said, it's typically
Yeah,
these
later.
things have multiple levels, but it's so dramatic and full of meaning that it's worth restatement. Not just God said, "Let there be light," and it was restated, and there was light.
Right.
He said, "Let there be it," and then it happened. And
Yeah,
that's it's repetitive to emphasize like just the drama of that radical shift.
when you talked about the importance of that previous verse, right, setting the stage, and building that drama, because you were talking about how you could go straight from verse 1 to verse 3. You could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue you could go straight from the phrase, in the beginning God said, let there be light, and there was light. You could even do
Yeah.
that too, and that would have made sense. But that's why those first two verses are really worth unpacking, because they build that drama, they set that stage, they explain the necessity of the light,
Yeah.
if you will. That's what is this light and why is it necessary?
Yeah.
And you get that building up to here where you now see the light.
Yeah. I mean, if we imagine these as being, I don't know how far I want to stretch this, but depending on your perspective, but if you imagine these as being oral traditions, or even if you don't imagine it as being oral traditions, and it is being written from the beginning, but then definitely being transferred to people orally a lot, orally a lot, then you have to think of somebody telling this story.
Yes.
Like that's what's so powerful. I mean, if you read these out loud and actually tell it like a drama teacher might, or something like that,
Right, yeah, no.
Now the earth was empty and formless, with the darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, and everybody who's gathered around is on the edge of their seat, and then God said, let there be light, and there was light, and it becomes something that's, it's cliched if you've grown up in the church a little bit to you, which is a shame, but you really have to think about the power of that what that teaches you.
For sure. Yeah, we don't read
this.
We don't read this often enough with new eyes, if that makes sense. And that is necessary for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about science and the modern scientific narrative being kind of flipped on its head in terms of light without a source. It should be noted that it actually does the same with the ancient surrounding narratives too, because in other ancient narratives, you have light coming from a god that is the source of light. So, the sun is a god, the moon is a god. So you still have this source from which light emanates. And here you see a god who creates light with no source. Right?
Yeah, let there be.
It is not a God who is the source of light. I mean, he is, but at the same time, he creates it as a separate thing, not a thing emanating from him. Right? He says, let there be light, and then there is light, not, bursting forth from him and, within him in that same way as you would see with the ancient gods. So it seems it's another way that declares the superiority of the God of Israel above all others. So all right, so breaking this down a little bit further, the beginning with light, I think is important when it comes to this conceptual approach to the universe, right? Uh, in starting with light, we see that this is the beginning of God's order in the universe, and it God's light is the foundation of the order, and it stands in contrast to the chaos and darkness which we saw in the previous verse. I find it interesting going to the idea of symbolism being embedded all throughout creation, that the more we grow to understand the truth of materialistically of the universe, uh, the more that is true. The symbolism is true, right? All life on earth is dependent upon the sun. No sun, no life. No light, no life. And the same is true, of God's light. We don't have a meaningful life. If we don't have that order, we don't really have a life in that sense. It needs that meaning to really be a true life. So just the reflection of that, in the materialist sense and then in the spiritual sense, is very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Same is true. I mean, you remove the light from Earth, right? Block out the sun. It's a sure, quick way to return the Earth to being formless and void.
Yeah.
And the same, I think, is true of God's light, God's order.
Okay, interesting.
That we're about to see. So that's the conceptual framework there. The idea, and then of course, so God proclaims this, then we have the idea of let there be, right? Once again, direct contrast with surrounding myths. Other mythologies have long stories involving sort of the process of light coming from these gods, from these sources. The God of Israel speaks, and then it is. That's it. And that is a sharp contrast in terms of the description of the power, right? In the other surrounding myths, they have this power, but it sort of builds up to it, and there's this process, whereas God just speaks and then it is. That's pretty simple,
Yeah. This is
so, well, I want to say real quickly,
you can continue.
Yeah,
you continue.
Just real quickly to finish off that thought, it doesn't mean that he didn't use a set of means like we were talking about with the meteor, to like bring about light. But the point here is that we are meant to understand the inevitability of a decree of God, right? We don't, sort of the point is there may be a story to exactly how things went from God saying, let there be light, to there being light. There may be a material story to that. However, how exactly that happened is irrelevant, because God is the sovereign cause. He speaks and it happens. That's what we're meant to learn from this verse here, in that sense, is the inevitability of a declaration of God.
Yeah. I think it enshrines a power in speech too.
Oh yeah.
Generally.
That
the idea is that the earth isn't hewn, it isn't forged, there's not a description of that. The more important thing is that the thing is spoken, is that the intention is given, and
there's something to declaring an intention and then making that happen.
Yeah, that the declaration is the most important part, I think.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, it's well, I don't know if it's directly the Nietzsche quote of "He who has a why can sustain any how," but it is something akin to that. That the most important thing in accomplishing something is speech. And this is potentially revisited with humanity in the story of Babel, but we don't need to get into that too much. But I think that's important, though, to highlight too, is that there is a recognition from the almost immediately here in the narrative that speech is the most powerful thing in the ordering of chaos.
Yes, yeah, it's the declaration is a necessary part of the ordering process.
Yeah, not even so necessary that it's the only one worth mentioning
Yes.
in this context.
Yeah. It's
Like it's that I don't remember there's this ridiculous Recess episode. If that ages us, but for those who've seen Recess, the old
sure.
cartoon show, where one of them becomes pharaoh of the playground, and he keeps issuing edicts of saying, "So shall it be written, so shall it be done."
Right,
And so
right.
this idea of that the writing down of it means that it's accomplished, means that it's completed.
Right.
And
that
this
is
is
so that's
that's a
not something
powerful
for all of
concept.
us. Yeah, it's not something all of us are capable of. Only God is capable of you know every decree that he makes coming true, right? But I do think we are meant to learn from the fact that God does it this way. Well, to your point of what the verse could have been, the verse could have simply been said, God
God
created
made
light.
light.
Yeah, there was light. God, let there be light. Instead, it does include this declaration, right? And so
Yeah.
there's
Well, I understand I think what you're getting at is that if that is the reality for God, does that mean it's the reality for humanity?
yeah,
Is that what you're
not
getting at?
yeah, it's not exactly true that it is the reality for humanity, that if we speak,
Yeah.
it
Well,
is
that's why bringing the context to the story of the Tower of Babel,
right.
of that it certainly is powerful enough for humanity that God in thwarting the plans for the Tower of Babel doesn't knock down the tower
No, correct.
and doesn't kill
Correct.
the
Yes.
people. He
Yes.
simply removes the capability of their of language.
Yeah,
And
it's
so it's powerful enough that speech is the tool that God uses to impede creation at that time.
I'm trying to say, I guess, that it is necessary but not sufficient, if that makes sense, right? And so by God taking that away in the Tower of Babel, he took away the necessary part. It
Yeah,
was
I think fundamental would be a good way of putting it.
sure, yeah,
It's
yeah,
fundamental. Lacking it means that you are not capable of doing it, but
yes,
it is not
yes,
sufficient
right.
to go beyond that.
This is something I talk about with the idea of story, right? You have to be able to tell a story before you can live that story. You
Yeah,
have to be able to see yourself living out this particular idea before you actually can live it out.
yeah,
That's related to that for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so and then what I really want to hit on here that I think is the interesting part of this all is the idea of light and darkness. So we saw darkness previously, and we saw light here. Now, conceptually speaking, um, we we view light actually as the default, because we
Mm-hmm.
define darkness as
It's
the
the absence
absence
of
of
light.
light, right?
Mm-hmm.
So philosophically, if one is to ask, what is the default, light or dark, the default is light, because darkness is defined by it. So therefore light is the starting point of our understanding of this dynamic between these two things. But it's interesting that our experience, in a way, seems to be the opposite. In a way, I think the way we experience life is where light feels like an intervention into the static of darkness. The sun comes up each day and it sparks change and growth and movement and all of this. And then it leaves and we go into a state of stasis, right? Sleep being this sort of like this like holding chamber, this like everything's on pause. And this gives a feeling of light being the intervention. I mean, we say we turn on a light. We don't say we turn on the darkness when we go to sleep. So it feels to us like life is light is the intervention. However, if we understand what's really happening, we can see that the universe does actually match this conceptual argument of light being the default. Because when we think about our experience of night and day, the sun stays constant. The sun's actually the constant thing in the center of our solar system, always shining its light forth. It's the earth that changes, and the earth that moves us from one state to the other. And so we see here that light actually then can be thought of again as the physical default in a way. And this, to me, I think God designed all this on purpose, because he designed us in a way where we feel a pull in the opposite direction, and that's the thing that we're meant to resist. So we feel this idea that darkness is our default, right, and light is the deviation from normality, right? That is our experience. That's what we feel. And while God's universe is designed in a way where the light is actually meant to be the default, we understand that we have to fight to stay in the light, if you will, because our experience is one where darkness is the thing we fight against, right? We have ways to create darkness during the day. It certainly wasn't like something humanity strived for, though, right? Like our goal has always been to create things that would light up the night, that would light up the darkness, right? And that our pull would be to light up the darkness. That reflects what God wants of us in this world, is to bring his light to the darkness, wipe out the darkness. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is where, because I want to reconcile this with the previous concept that in the previous episode, we said that darkness was the default
of earth, not all creation. All creation is the heavens and the earth working together.
Okay, so the earth.
So the way God has designed all creation to be meant to work, the sort of default operating system for all creation, is to have the light lighting up the darkness.
Okay, it makes more sense.
Okay. Now, of course, too often we're pulled into darkness, right? And that is why I think God designed sleep to mimic something like death in a way. That sort of symbolizes the idea of as we're pulled to darkness, we're pulled to death. Of course, from a materialistic perspective, obviously we still need to sleep. I'm not saying we should never sleep, but I'm just saying symbolically, that's the symbolic importance of sleep, right? And we, in our lives, I think we are too often pulled to this idea of darkness, right? We grow comfortable without, well, we grow in a sense of seeming comfort with a lack of growth, a lack of change, a lack of advancement. We like to fall into our simple routines where we don't push ourselves, where there's no change. These are the things that are a lack of light, right? And we have this collective agreement, I think, in society at times, that we want to live a life that requires as little out of us, in terms of change and growth, right? What's the minimal amount that we have to change in order to continue along, the static darkness of pleasure fulfillment, if you will.
Yeah.
So the way I would describe this is, we live lives where we work for the weekend and we work for the vacation, right? The points at which we're no longer growing and moving forward and improving things and building things and doing this sort of like productive act. Whereas rather we should be living lives where we view the weekend and the vacation as the thing that refuels us and propels us into our rightful default state of work. If that makes sense. And I'm describing work there obviously as the process of light bringing.
The idea that's sitting with me, and I hope you can draw this in and relate it, because I'm just going to share it as it comes, is the rotating Earth that you posited, and then are that would mean that there is a design for regular experience of darkness, and the and
Let me
and light's going to be categorized as good. So that's, I don't know if I can say for certain that that darkness is good, but just that we are designed to regularly experience darkness and routinely experience it. However, we sleep during it, and so there's, you can jump in. But that's just what's sitting with me.
Well, it is not that we're, I mean, I guess we're designed sort of, to have regular experience of darkness. I think what God's doing by allowing us to regularly experience the darkness is to understand that as humans, we, of our own capabilities, can't perpetually stay in the light, if you will, right? We, as humans, we're not capable of maintaining order. As humans, we inevitably fall into the darkness. We inevitably have times where our own capabilities will not perpetually keep us in the light. We have to pass through phases of darkness because we're not God. We're not capable of living perpetually in the light on our own. So it's a way of sort of having us live out and see through that are a demonstration of our weaknesses, right? And to the idea that we sleep through it, that is, I think, partially to the idea of don't be consumed by that period of darkness. Don't live within it, sleep through it, right? Avoid it. And in a way, when we're sleeping through a period of, life of time, we're sort of not engaging with it during that time. And so that's a way of the sleep symbolizes not engaging with the darkness. So inevitably, as humans, we face the darkness. We come across the darkness because we're not God. We can't perpetually be in the light of our own accord. And so of our weaknesses, we come into contact with the darkness, but don't engage with it. Sleep your way through it, get past through it without being affected by it.
Well, I'm curious. Well, I don't know. I want to extend the idea because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And we're talking, I think, more abstractly now, but I do want to extend
it's more about what that experience as a human, what does that experience symbolizes? What does it symbolize about our participation in the order making process?
Yeah. Because I'm less inclined to say that the darkness is fundamentally bad. And I know that doesn't, and here's reasons why, is because sleep, number one, is valuable. It's restorative. And it also, I would describe one more thing before, and you can jump in.
Yeah.
The other thing that you would have to, that I think is worth contending with, is that the darkness also implies chaos, and implies unbound reality almost.
Okay.
Which is the experience of dreams, which take place in the darkness, in sleep. And so you experience you don't just experience the physical darkness, but you do, when you go to sleep and go to dreams, you experience a more chaotic reality, in the more not chaotic in even a bad way, but just chaotic in as unordered reality. So we do have regular experience with it.
Let me there's a few things there. Let me first address the idea of darkness as bad. We're previewing the next episode a little bit, but let's remember that in the following verse, God says it was good.
He says, and the light was good.
Yes. And so now we have to understand,
does that imply that dark is bad?
Light is conceptually the opposite of dark. So therefore, if light is good, then conceptually darkness must be the opposite. Now, if you want to say good, it is, if the light is good, darkness is not good, that is fine. However, getting back to the sleep thing, right? Because sleep is restorative, right? And sleep symbolizes this idea of not living in the darkness. That's what sleep symbolizes. Sleep symbolizes not living in the darkness. You
Yeah,
sleep
but
through it.
that's where the dream
So,
thing is important.
so what would be restorative? It would be restorative to not live in the darkness. That's why we're restored by sleep. Sleep is good for us because we don't live in the darkness. And when we don't live in the darkness, we're restored
But
and
that's what you're
better able to
missing.
live in the light.
Is that's what I'm saying, is that not only do you have the physical darkness that occurs at night that we could regularly experience, which most people don't because they sleep. What I'm saying is that sleep is, by the nature of dreams, is is chaos. It's chaotic, which is darkness.
Well, right. Sleep.
So even our reality is
no, but
chaotic.
what are dreams? What are dreams, right? Because this is interesting and here we look at the material, but from a material perspective, dreams occur because our brain is trying to make sense of our experiences throughout the day. It's trying to order it. So the very fact that they're chaotic is interesting because it shows us that if we attempt to order it on our own, as our dreams are an attempt to do, what happens? Chaos. So awesome. What happens inside you during sleep is like you experiencing a simulation of your attempt to order things versus God's ordering of things. And so through the safety of sleep, where you're not engaged with the darkness, you get this warning of what it would be like to live in the darkness, and that is the process of the dream, that chaotic ordering, chaotic attempt by you to order what you experience.
Why is it restorative?
Why is sleep itself restorative?
Yeah.
Well, sleep itself,
and then even dreams themselves are restorative.
Yeah, I think. I think sleep itself is restorative, and dreams as a byproduct of that. Now you're talking about the physical, right? Because it's physically restorative, right? And so God has made it physically restorative because it symbolizes not participating with the darkness. When you sleep, you don't participate with the darkness, right? You're avoiding it because it's dark out and I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just sleeping. So I'm not participating with the darkness. Well, that would be if we live our lives in a way where we're avoiding participating in the darkness, we're restored more and more in terms of being in the light. And so that is why the process of sleep would be restorative, is that it's a period of time where we don't participate with the darkness. And that represents, hey, live your life that way. The more you don't participate with the darkness, the more restored you are.
Interesting. Okay.
So that is the darkness and light that I guess we see played at here. And yeah, we feel this pull towards the darkness, I guess. And we need to find ourselves in the light, because the way the universe was designed, the way God made creation, is for it to have a default of being lit. And that's sort of the primary, theological takeaway we're trying to pull from with this verse, is the contrast with verse 2. Verse 2, you have the chaos and lack of order and lack of engagement from God. Here you have God saying, I'm engaging, I'm bringing my order, I'm bringing my design to bear on this creation, because without me, it's going to be like it was in verse 2. And so I am here to make sure it's not like it was in verse 2, setting the stage for the rest of creation. So all right, any more thoughts on it, or should we wrap there?
I think we can wrap there. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Okay. All right. With that, be sure to subscribe, follow, comment, email unschooltheology@protonmail.com, leave ratings, reviews, all that kind of stuff. And we will see you soon.